Our next conversation is Sonja. I think Sonja is less known, relatively new to the community, but was part of our cohort. I feel a little bit bad for asking Sonja to speak today because she's right in the middle of a really complicated, incredibly important project called Thrive by 5, which is, for those of us working with children, one of the most important new inventions in a way, new innovations for children. Very important. You'll hear about it more next year when it becomes public. But she's in field and running a very large census. So for a small organization sitting in Westlake, it's quite phenomenal that she's running a machine throughout the country. So I felt bad for asking her because she's in the middle of this. But maybe this is a good break, Sonja. So Sonja is going to chat to us about data and impact.
Now, any journey that you take has its curves and its bends, and there's some steep bits and some unexpected detours. But Thrive by 5 has looked a little bit more like this. Complicated, scary, and extremely, extremely easy to get lost. Now, in our space as leaders in sectors, in organizations, we often tell the story of a project at the end of the journey, right? We talk about the outcomes and the outputs, and then right at the end, we put a slide called challenges, right? Challenges and limitations. Well, full declaration, this is not going to be that kind of presentation. We are in the middle of this journey, and I'm going to use this opportunity, as I said, as therapy to talk about this journey. I'm literally going to let you look under the hood at what it takes to thrive. So firstly, just to give you a couple of slides on what the survey is all about. So what you're seeing here is obviously a map of South Africa, and all the little areas that are circled, the blue ones are wards, and the green ones are merged wards, so more than one ward. These are the areas that we are visiting for Thrive by 5. 400. Our aim is a nationally and provincially representative sample of young children. This is our destination in our journey. And our aim is to visit 432 enumerator areas across the country, and these are all of them. And to assess 5,500 4-year-old children, as well as the environments in which they live and the environments in which they learn. That's our destination. For every single child, the children have to be between the ages of 50 and 59 months. So we have to get their birth dates, accurate birth dates. They have to be randomly sampled. So it means we have to know the information of all the children in the population that we're working with in order to randomly sample particular children. For children who are attending a preschool, we are collecting information directly with the child, spending about 45 minutes with every single one of these 5,500 children, doing an assessment of their cognitive development and looking at their physical development. We're looking at their social and emotional functioning. We're interviewing their primary caregivers, either in person or telephonically. We are interviewing the child's teacher, we're interviewing the child's principal, and we're doing an observation of the interactions that child has in their classrooms, and an observation of the site. And every one of these data points is linked. So there are unique identifiers that have to be able to link multiple survey instruments so that we know for every single child data points from every single one of these instruments. For children who are not attending an early learning program, and this is a smaller sample, an experimental group of probably about 300 children, we are also doing direct assessments. We're looking at their social emotional functioning, and we're interviewing their caregivers. And this is happening in these children's homes. That's the destination. Right, when will we get there, Siven asks? Well, actually, it is a little bit of a race because we have to be at our destination by the 25th or so of November, because that's when early learning programs close shop. Children go home, they move from the Western Cape to the Eastern Cape. So it is a little bit of a race, and we can't start early in the year, because early in the year, children won't have had the opportunity of having a year of preschool attendance. So all of this have to happen within a very narrow window of time between September and November, with all the planned and unplanned closures of early learning programs that happen in between. Now, these slides, you can interpret literally and figuratively. At any one time, we have about 60 to 70 cars driving around the country with teams of field workers. The length and breadth of the country along all those enumerator areas. So we have literally experienced all of these. This week, one of our teams rolled their car. Luckily, they were okay, but they rolled their car trying to avoid a galloping horse. A team 2 weeks ago were hijacked and beaten. Thankfully, they're also okay in an area. We have communities where our teams are chased out of communities by criminals. We have communities where police say, please leave because we can't protect you. This isn't a safe community. We've had snowstorms in KwaZulu-Natal, floods, road closures, and strikes, all of which make fieldwork even more exciting. And we are only 1/3 of the way through this journey. Now, getting into communities in the first place is interesting, right? You've got these 432 areas across the country. Many of these communities are severely traumatized. You have strangers coming in, asking them, where are their 4-year-old children? People are understandably concerned. So we have to engage with ward councillors, with police, with ECD forums, with social workers, with schools, with health facilities. We have to put up posters and distribute flyers. We have to try and ease our way into communities in ways that they can trust us. For children who are not attending early learning programs, we have to go knock on doors. We need a random sample. We can't be only looking through NGOs, for example, because then we won't really know, we won't be speaking to those children who are most marginalized. We've knocked on thousands and thousands of doors. And just to put it in perspective, for every one child that we find, a 50 to 59-month-old child who's not attending an early learning program, we have to knock on an average of 100 doors. That is the scope of it. And then when we find an eligible child, we have to persuade the caregiver for them to participate. The biggest blockage we're finding is that caregivers are afraid. Not for their child's safety, we can persuade them about that. They're afraid because they think that they'll get into trouble, that their children are not attending an early learning program. They are fearful that social workers will remove their social grants, and so they don't want to participate. These are the realities. Now, because we have a really, really carefully constructed sampling frame, anytime a child or an early learning program, somebody refuses to participate, we can't just replace them. We have to go back to the sampling frame, and they have to be replaced through the sampling team. And all of this has to happen in real time while that assessor team is in that area. We have an army of people in the field, over 200 field workers traveling around the country. And each of these individuals has to be very, very carefully trained. We need to train them on how to navigate entry into a community, how to work with a young child, how to ask really sensitive questions. Some of these interviews are asking sensitive questions. Did you smoke during pregnancy? Did you drink during pregnancy? Is the father involved in this child's life? So they have to be trained on asking sensitive questions. They need to get trained on POPI compliance, on confidentiality. And of course, they have to be trained to implement every single one of the fieldwork tools. And just like a bunch of drivers on a very, very busy road, they have to follow rules, and they have to follow a lot of rules. Everyone has to follow the research protocols. Now, because these individuals, these assessors are working with individual children, they're sitting down with the 4-year-old child, there's a huge scope for assessors to introduce bias into the data collection. Therefore, they have to follow the script very, very carefully. So we invest heavily in these individuals. And, big sigh, and I think you can all take a sigh at this point, we have a very transient workforce, right? I'm sure you all experience that. We invest in these individuals, and then we can't offer them full-time employment. And they get offered better work opportunities, and they leave. And then we have to recruit and retrain. And remember, we are racing against time. So, with such a big team moving across the country, often in areas with very poor connectivity, communication is absolutely essential. And this is where oh, that's a terrible picture. This is where our dashboard comes in. So just like a dashboard on a car trip, you look at your dashboard to see, to check your speed, your oil levels, your fuel levels, sometimes your tire pressure, your distance, how far you've traveled. So we have the equivalent dashboard, which draws on data that's coming into the field in real time. So we want to track whether people are at the right place. So we record GPS coordinates. We look at the time that a assessment is being done. We look at the duration of the assessment. We look at the range and scores that are coming through. If these are outside of an expected range, it pings on our dashboard. And we have 15 quality controllers monitoring the dashboard in real time and responding to any issues. Now, one of the most challenging issues that we address is language. These assessments have to be done in every one of 11 of our 12 official languages. We're not doing sign language, but everything else we are doing. The assessor has to be matched with the child's language. Now, firstly, there's 2 points here. The firstly is assessors may be mother tongue Zulu, for example, but they may not be able to read in Zulu. They may not be able to follow the script that we carefully prepared in Zulu. So the first thing we had to do when we were recruiting assessors is we had to develop, because it didn't exist, a language fluency test to see whether assessors could actually read sufficiently in their mother tongue. And then we had to find out for every single one of these children, what is their home language? And then when we send our assessors into the field, we have to match the language with the assessor. The assessors get to the programs, they start working with the children. The principal said the child speaks Zulu, but when you start engaging with the child, you realize they start talking in another language because actually they understand maths concept in a different language, or they're more comfortable speaking a different language. So now the assessor doesn't match anymore. And a red flag pings up on our dashboard because we can see that there's a bad match between the assessor and the child on our dashboard. Every single assessor is being monitored very, very carefully so that we can look out for any kind of assessor bias. So on a weekly basis, we rate every assessor according to how many pings they've had on our dashboard, and they fall into one of 3 categories. They're either green, orange, or red. For the green assessors, this is the way we want to go, and some of these green assessors actually become mentors for other assessors. The orange assessors get the equivalent of roadside assistance. So what happens is we send a mechanic, a mentor, into the field. They watch them for a day. They fill out a sheet recording how they're doing. And then these assessors, the orange assessors, come to what we call office hours. So 2 hours a week, our team is online, and we talk the assessors through some of the issues that we've observed in the field. And hopefully we send them back and they become green assessors the next week. And then we have our red assessors. These are immediately removed from the field. We do one-on-one support, and if necessary, there's an off-ramp, and they get removed from the project. So with so many moving parts and such an enormously challenging project, obviously it's really important that we have the right team driving this and that the team works together really well. Now, due to the complexity of the project, the size of the project, the timeframes, we weren't able to get one service provider. So we had to contract multiple service providers. There weren't the skills or competencies capacity within a single service provider. Contracting multiple service providers introduced another level of complexity in a really very challenging venture. So this was me a couple of weeks ago. We had an overheated engine on this journey. And in a journey like this, which is hard, it's important, and it's dangerous roads, figuratively. This was a really frightening experience personally for me as the person responsible for the survey. So we pulled the car over, we stopped the journey, we paused it. And in fact, this was the moment when I started thinking about I was thinking about this presentation, and I had wanted to tell you the story, and I thought, I don't know how this is going to end. At this point in time, I thought, and I made a commitment to myself that I would stand here and tell you the story however the story ended. So I'm very relieved to say that we managed to get back on the road. The engine's been checked. We've added some extra drivers. We have a much more detailed roadmap. We know where we're going. And personally, I have learned so many really important lessons. And this is where the seatbelts come in. So I'm going to talk about 3 seatbelts that I think personally have saved me in this tumultuous journey. The first is that I realized that my goal was not to deliver a 2024 Thrive by 5 index. My goal was to deliver high quality data. If I put high quality data as the goal, I could take the chance of actually moving out the Thrive by 5 index. And that was a really, really important decision. And luckily, we didn't have to do that. But it was a really important milestone for us to know that the emphasis was on the quality data. That had to be the lens through which we made every single decision. And in order to do that, we had to focus not only on the technical skills, we had to focus on our ways of working. We needed to get those multiple teams working better together. We needed more transparency and trust so that people could raise issues as they were coming up, and collectively we could address them in constructive ways. So that was one seatbelt for me. The second seatbelt, which is really, I think, key to my survival, is perspective. The only way that I could really navigate a journey like this is by focusing on the incredible, deep learning opportunities that it presents. Mistakes in a project like this cost, and I want to get my money's worth of lessons out of this process. It's inevitable that things are going to go wrong, and we really have to be looking at this through a growth mindset. This becomes a psychological buffer and allows us to keep our foot on the pedal when it feels really rough. And finally, we have to keep our eyes on the road. So it's very tempting to want to unpack everything that's happened to date. It's very hard to hold back on the frustrations when you feel like you've been really disappointed. But you can't unpack your baggage while you're driving a car. You have to put your baggage in the boot, you have to get into the driver's seat, commit to the journey, and keep looking forward. And that's really been the third seatbelt for me. So this is how I normally end my presentations. It's a cheerful invitation for you to join the Data Drive. So I won't be surprised if you're a little reluctant at this point. But I do think that as leaders in the space, we all feel passionately about what we do. So we feel our mistakes, we feel the challenges really personally. So I think that for me, this was a real reminder that we can't drive alone. We really have to have co-drivers.